Amazing.
All
So
right.
if I can just get everyone to, so first things first, I will just say this event for those of you that are attending, firstly, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come listen to us, have a chat about what Trans Day of Visibility means to each and every one of us here. I'm obviously Maddie Harrington. I'm going to be the chair and MC of tonight's panel. I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that we want this panel to be as interactive as possible. So if you've got questions, drop them in the chat box below. And also, if you want to contribute to the conversation as well, drop it in the chat box below. If you're happy with what someone said, drop a +1. If you disagree, drop a +2. Things like that. And if at the end, when we come to questions, if you want to raise your hand, you'll see in the box below, you can do that and type in your question there. We can get to it. But just before we begin, to get an understanding of where we are all located, can I all just get you to drop into the chat what state or territory you're coming from here today? Go. Ooh, we've got a few WAs. Awesome. I see Queensland. Yes, Queensland. Cool, cool. Awesome. Okay, and one last question for you all. Where are you calling in from? Are you calling in from home? Are you calling in from work? Where in the world are you right now? Okay, we've got a few homes. Doggy park. So basically everyone's at home. This is great. I love this. Awesome. Keep going, guys. And what I'll do just in the meantime is we shall kick off tonight's event by firstly just quickly doing an acknowledgement of country. So just before we begin tonight's proceedings, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I would also like to note that we are all sitting on different Indigenous lands right now, and we all pay our respects to the relevant elders on the lands on which we are located. So thank you all so much for joining us here tonight. We really appreciate it. I will just quickly get everyone on the panel to introduce themselves for you all one by one, and I'll go based off what I see on my screen just for sheer convenience sake. So GC, and this will go for everyone else as well. If you can please just introduce yourselves to us, what you do for work and how you're a part of Out for Australia, that'd be great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Giancarlo Tavera. I am the National National Community Partnerships Director. So I head up all the community partnerships South Australia does. For work, I work in disability public policy, working for the National Disability Peak Organisation. And I think that's all the questions.
Cool. Ezra.
Certainly. Ezra, they, them pronouns. For my day job, I work in communications for the state government here in Victoria. And outside of that, I moonlight as the Victorian State Director for Out for Australia.
Amazing. Vaz.
Hello. I am Vaz. I am a uni student at the moment. I'm studying Bachelor of Science, Maths and Education. I'm looking to become a math teacher. I'm in my first year. I work in retail at the moment, and I am Out for Australia's National Communications Manager.
Brilliant. And next up we have Elise.
Hi everyone, I'm Elise. I work and live in Brisbane, where I work as a town planner at Brisbane City Council. I also, and this year I started as a position as student outreach officer with the Queensland Out for Australia team. So that's really exciting. I'm keen to see where that goes.
Awesome. And last but not least, we have Danny.
Hi, my name's Danny. I work for KPMG in their sustainability services team. And my role at OFA is as a general volunteer in New South Wales, but I've also been helping out with the revamp of the mentoring program.
Amazing. Perfect. All right. Thanks so much for that, team. So I think I'll do things. Look, we've got a request for everyone to just quickly state their pronouns if you can. So GC, we'll go in the same order.
Hey there.
S,
They, them, theirs. Yep.
Bass,
They, them, theirs.
Elise,
She, her.
and Danny.
She, her.
Oh, and I guess for the avoidance of doubt, mine are also she, her. So welcome. I hope that helps. So firstly, let's kick off by asking the first real question of the panel tonight. The tricky one. So can you tell me, what does Transgender Day of Visibility mean to you? Let's throw it over to Danny.
That's a good one. That's a tricky one, an interesting one, I should say, for me. I've only been out as trans for 2 years, and I feel like I'm definitely in the beginning stages of in a journey of self-acceptance and being like comfortable with who I am. And so, to be honest, I don't connect at the moment as much with Trans Day of Visibility as, you know, I hope to in the future. But I do understand how important it is for the trans community to have a day like this, and also just how important visibility is for the trans and queer community as a whole.
Amazing. So when you say that you don't quite connect at the moment, like what do you think is causing that sort of disconnection there?
I haven't had too much involvement with the queer community and the trans community, and I feel that kind of disconnection there, which I am, you know, I know that it's something that I'm working on. It's a very, very personal thing, of course.
Oh, of course.
But yeah, I mean, as you of course know, but I think starting to volunteer with OFA has kind of been a nice little stepping stone into you know, meeting other people within the community and yeah, going further on that journey.
Amazing. Oh, that's awesome. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, it is such a personal journey. GC, you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, I really connect with what Danny said. I'm also new in the journey. Like, I identify as non-binary, and that's something that I haven't always identified with. I think the meaning of the day is really about understanding what it is to be part of this community. And I think that's a really evolving thing. Like, I know when I came out, like more than half my lifetime ago, this conversation had never happened. And so, you know, it is a personal one, like Danny said, and being able to be part of that conversation whenever you're ready is a really important one. And trying to find that community when you need to is part of that journey, personally.
That's awesome. Did anyone else have anything to add?
Yes. It's interesting. What's been said so far really resonates on in terms of my personal
because
community.
I know you personally, and I know particularly, you know, how, you know, you and I are almost more or less at the same stage of our respective journeys. So, you know, as someone that is still very early on, what does this sort of day mean to you, and like how your personal feelings as someone that identifies as non-binary feel?
It's a good question. Personally, again, I would say it's hard to say that I've necessarily had so much of a track record of engaging with it individually, but then I've had, for the last 2 or 3 years, opportunities to be involved through organizations like OFA, through the Pride Network at my organization, and then just conversations with friends and the wider community. In terms of the dialogue that happens on Trans Day of Visibility, to me, it's markedly different from what we might hear on one of the other days of significance. And that's not to say that, you know, it's any better or worse. I think each day of significance has its own dialogue that's important. What I really like about Trans Day Visibility, what really sort of jumps out for me in my personal, in sort of my experience in these volunteering spaces, is it's become quite quickly a day for people to have honest conversations about the huge variety of intersecting like challenges and struggles that exist within the trans and gender diverse community. I think it's a really powerful day to have honest conversations. And I've been really privileged to see some amazing conversations over the last couple of years. Yeah, that's where it lands for me.
Okay, no, that's interesting. That's interesting because I guess for me personally, I'm so new to all of this myself. You know, for those that don't know me personally, obviously, I'm also a transgender woman, and my journey has been within the last 12 months. I came out January 1st last year. So for me, this is my second TDOV, but also I think each and every one that comes further on is going to mean more. And I think that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from all of you so far, is that we're all at different points of our journey, but a lot of us here are still relatively new in our journeys, in our personal journeys to this point. So Vaz, Elise, did either of you have anything that you wanted to chime in there?
I was going to say, like, especially just with the word visibility and how important that is. Like, it's so important, especially for the wider community, to just show, to be a visible trans person sometimes. And to have,
Absolutely.
to have visible trans role models, just, you know, normal people doing normal things that just happen to be trans. And, you know, that's how I kind of worked out who I was and what I need to do, is by by seeing visible trans people online in particular. And I think it'll help a lot of people who are perhaps questioning, or cis people who want to learn more, you know, that kind of thing in particular.
I guess, you know, I think you raise a very, very good point there about the role of our cisgendered allies. So for some of you who may be coming along today, you may not know what the term cis means. It's basically just a term that we use in the trans community it's the opposite to trans. Cis is Latin for the same side. So it means on the same side. So the gender that you were born and assigned at birth, whereas trans means to transition from gender A to gender B. And that includes non-binary. Non-binary is a gender identity, as is being female, male, etc. So that's kind of what we're trying to get at by way of reference to terms tonight. Just thought it might be helpful to chime that in. Vas, how do you feel? What's going on over there? What's going on in the blue room? You're a bit muted at the moment. I'm going to unmute you. Go.
It's kind of like, I'm the youngest person on this panel, so a lot of
That's okay. You're
the significance
amazing.
of like the queer things is, it doesn't like sunk in. Like, I feel like I'm very privileged to be here. Like, I haven't experienced like the 10, 20 years ago that JC was talking about. So I feel like its significance for me will build. But as it stands now, I'm just kind of grateful to seeing like visible trans people, and especially like non-binary people, because there's no one way that we look, and that's really like hardening to see. Like, I don't need to conform to like androgyny to be non-binary. So I guess that's what TDOV means to me.
Amazing. I guess touching on that then, you've all mentioned how important it is to have visible role models. Who do you are your visible role models, be that societally, be that people in your life? I can see you rolling your eyes there, as
No, I'm thinking. I'm not rolling my eyes. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, like, who in your life is important to you that you've looked up to? I mean, for me personally, being a openly transgender lawyer, I find it so incredibly hard to find role models because there's so many gay and lesbian lawyers out there, and it's just not for trans people. So in some ways, I kind of have to go, well, look, I have to take on that mantle in some ways of being that visible trans role model for others, to show that, look, it is possible to be open and to be out in such a conservative and crusty industry, or at least that's the way it's perceived to be. But you know, this could be anyone. This could be someone in Hollywood that you look up to. This could be a friend, a family member. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Oh,
GC. Oh, Baz?
GC, do you want to go first?
I was just for me, it wasn't really a person. For me, it was my culture.
Amazing. Tell us more.
And that to me, like, so my cultural heritage is Filipino. And when I thought about the beginning of my journey, a lot of source of comfort was the fact that pre-colonial notions of gender wasn't aligned with what we see gender as today. You know, and that's been a real source of strength for me. And it really came out this year for me when I walked in Mardi Gras this year, when I felt like I was connecting with that a bit more. And it's all part of this idea that you know, that it is all constructed, and going back to that source of history and that source of truth before things became imbued with with a whole host of things like colonialism and history and all that stuff. Real highbrow stuff, really was a huge thing to think about, because, yeah, like in my language, there is a lot of words are gender neutral, and the idea that there was like that a change when the Spanish came was a interesting concept.
I think that's really important to note, because people have this perception of trans people being the new kids on the block, particularly within the LGBT community. But realistic, you know, if you look at any article in The Australian, for instance, you know, trans people are made out to be, you know, this new phase that's just popped up out of the last 10 years that all the millennials are subscribing to. But realistically, as GC says, trans people have existed in every culture, in every country, including the West, for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. You know, you look at the Pacific Islands as well. Yes, Ez.
What you were saying there, GC, really struck a chord with me. So my family background is originally Jewish, and it kind of like that cultural paradigm. So Judaism's obviously quite a lot closer to in terms of how it's perceived, to sort of Western norms as we see them now. And under Western norms, I think we do have this issue of we don't have role models to look back to over the last maybe 30, 40 years to the same degree of visibility as other sectors of the community, because we weren't visible. We are the first sort of majorly visible generation in this paradigm. But something that's been a real source of strength for me is, you know, in Torah and in Jewish scripture, there are 5 genders. And there's, you know, debate as to whether or not that's gender or sex, and there is a distinction drawn. But that's really a source of strength for me, and even notwithstanding necessarily the challenges I face in community nowadays, where maybe the community's kind of imbibed those Western ideals of binary gender, of fixed gender, and of immutable gender. Nevertheless, there's this sort of undercurrent of normative understanding and culture that is contrary to that. So it's been a source of strength. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Ez. Did anyone else want to add anything to that, particularly?
Mine's a bit more personal. Like it wasn't like religion, or it wasn't my culture. It was actually my partner. I was 15 at the time, so it's like I was really lucky because like they came out to me as non-binary, and that actually got me thinking about gender. And I was like, oh, I might not be non-binary, and they weren't really like a role model per se, but it was really nice to just know that there was another non-binary person around. And then I found out that another one of my really close friends was like gender fluid. So it was really nice to have people around me who were also trans. So I guess like they were really good reminders that, you know, like we exist in everyday frames, and we're doing fine in our everyday frames.
No, perfect. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing, guys. So I guess I'll quickly touch on things at work now. So obviously, as we've all alluded to, we all work varying jobs outside of OFA. And I'm sure you can all relate that at times it certainly is a bit of a challenge trying to juggle OFA with work, with life. So can you just let me know and let everyone here know what the, for those of you that have now settled in your career choice, how that's been for you and why you chose that particular career or industry that you're working in?
I can go first, that's all right. But
Yep, shoot.
and I got into my career choice as a town planner, which not many people are that aware of exactly what they do, which is quite funny because town planning in a way affects every part of your daily life if you live in a city or town of some sort. But I got into it in a high school subject for geography.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and we did some related assignments, which were like about looking at a local area and looking at problems and trying to work out how you might fix them. And that got me into it. And then I studied at uni and I really enjoyed it at uni. And now I'm on to my second planning job. I was working for a building certifier for a while. Now I'm with Brisbane City Council. So now I do like strategic planning for parks and stuff in Brisbane City, which is really fun actually. I quite enjoy it. It's like, you know, what parks go where, what do we put on them, how they're used, all that kind of thing.
And how do you find being openly trans in your role? Well, being, you know, out and just visible, like how has that been for you? Because obviously I know you and I know your story, but, you know, why don't you tell it to us so that we can all hear it and go, okay, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, when my previous planning job I had before I transitioned and before I came out. And I transitioned while I was at my previous job. And I think for a good 6 months of my transition, I was still closeted at that job, which was quite a painful experience. I found going to work as a person, I didn't feel like I was. But then when I got the opportunity to apply for Brisbane City Council, I was like, you know, this would be an awesome opportunity to start. Even if I come into it openly trans, they would never have known pre-transition me. And in that sense, it's like, I feel a lot better about it. And I mentioned it in my application that I was trans. I'm sure it was widely known that I was trans. I was well supported by some LGBT plus employees already at council who helped me with connections and helped me with applications and stuff, and just made sure that the application system was set up to be as good as possible for a transgender applicant, which was really handy and it saved me a lot of drama. But no, council was really amazing about it. They did everything they could to make me feel as accommodated as possible, to use my preferred name in everything they could, because at the time my legal name was still my dead name, but they made sure that my preferred name was as widely used as possible. And yeah, I don't know, like it's funny now, in the team that I work in, I haven't actually told many people that I'm trans. I'm assuming some of them figured it out. Some of them have me on social media, so they'll see it there. Some of them I have told. I have an older co-worker who I work with a lot, and I love working with her, and we've had very long discussions about all that kind of stuff. So it's really nice. It's been ultimately really rewarding, and I quite enjoy the way council approaches LGBT staff, and yeah.
I think, yeah, like locally here in Brisbane and in Queensland, Brisbane City Council are one of the highest rated LGBTI employers every year in the AWEI awards. So, you know, I wasn't expecting you to have any troubles, and I'm so glad to hear that you have none, because that's what we want to hear. You know, these are the stories that we want to hear. We want to see companies that are going, okay, yep, cool, trans people exist, they're just part of staff. We'll accommodate them like we do anyone else. That there's no overburdening hurdles that you have to jump through to be who you really are. Danny, did you have anything to chime in there?
I was just about to jump in. So that question, the first question you asked on like if I'm settled in my chosen career, it ties in really well with my journey as a whole, because I like Ezra, actually, I come from a Jewish family. I grew up in quite a insulated, conservative community, and I finished school. I went to uni with these kind of expectations that were both expressly, conveyed and also just implicit in the culture I was in. That you got to follow this like certain path. So I kind of I jumped into a business and arts degree, thinking I was just doing the right thing, or just what I should be doing. And I actually started my career in KPMG as an auditor, in external audit. And just to I thought to myself, I'll get my CA. That's what I should be doing, make my parents happy, make myself happy, I guess. And I've only realized now, even when I've moved teams, that I'm not settled in my career at all. And especially in the corporate world, I've been out for just over almost a year now, in that environment, but I've been in KPMG for 4 years altogether, and it's all I know as like in my working life. And I definitely I feel this nagging need to try other things. So I've actually I've started working part-time, which
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it happened. I started, it's been about a month, but it coincided very conveniently with the coronavirus pandemic. But yeah, so I've kind of, now I'm on that journey of figuring myself out and kind of catching up on lost time, I guess.
No, absolutely. And I think, everyone comes to this at different paces. For me, I feel like I've just gone from 0 to 100 in a matter of a year. I feel like I've found myself in that. Realistically, for me, there's nothing further that I need to do or need to find. I'm comfortable in my career as a lawyer, and not everyone's going to come to that at the same pace. And I think that's totally understandable, and it's totally acceptable, and it should be talked about more, particularly for those of us who are still in our first 5 years of employment outside of uni. Those years are particularly volatile.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, because I grappled with this decision to start working part-time and, exploring what I actually wanted to do, because I think we are all, just the society we live in, we're kind of taught that we need to always be progressing and always moving forward, even if it's not what we want to do, or it's what we think what we want to do, but not really right for us. We're always taught to just kind of keep moving, instead of it took me a long time to grapple with that idea, and say to myself, it's okay to just stop. And I mean, I'm in a fortunate position where I can afford to take, get paid less money, but I can still support myself and have that time to work on myself and just enjoy my life.
No, amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that, Danny. Really appreciate that.
Pleasure.
GC is Bass? No? You look like, oh, there we go. Bass, yes.
So I'm not out yet. I'm not out of my workplace because I don't yet, which is fun, which is great.
We've all been there. We've all done that.
But the thing is, when I think about being out in my workplace, it's so open-ended because I want to be a teacher. And it depends on what kind of schooling institute I go to, whether they have like support for great students, whether they have support for great teachers, whether the anti-discrimination laws are in place by then, the religious discriminations bill. So it's really volatile because I'm used to being out everywhere I go, like family excluded. Everywhere I go, I make it a point that I'm non-binary. I tell people not to call me gal or lady or woman. I hate it. But so just the prospect of potentially having to go back into the closet for my own safety and like my own job security is pretty terrifying. So in retail and stuff, I work with teenagers, and they're pretty accepting because this is like the norm that we've grown up around. So I don't know, going into education is kind of really scary, but yeah, I'm still gonna do it. But it's
Good. And I think that's the main thing is, you know, sometimes we do have to take a leap of faith. It can be scary coming out at a new job, especially. And particularly one that is so potentially volatile because it involves children and the like. You know, we all hear of helicopter mums and things like that. And this is that times 10. You know, particularly with conservative ideologies out there that are pushing, as I said earlier, you know, things like the Australian, where it's a phase, it's an ideology. So I can completely understand your concerns there, Baz. What to you would make the workplace, I guess in your current workplace, have you experienced any issues there? Obviously all your colleagues are fine, but you know, how have management been and things like that?
In retail, they can't really say anything with that unless they want me to kind of go fair work on them and get on them for like discrimination and stuff. So management hasn't acknowledged it. I don't even know if management knows. But to be honest, if they did have a response, I would quit before they did anything. Because I want to put myself in that environment. Like I know that I'm fortunate enough to be in a financial position where I can say that. So that's kind of where I'm at now in my current job.
Awesome, thanks. Ez, I know you've got a bit of a story.
I have to
I'm going to
admit-
put you on the spot.
Oh boy. I have to admit, my first reaction was, oh, settle, what's that? I definitely don't know if I'm settled in my career.
Well, not so much even just settled, but how
fair.
have things been in your career? Because
It's-
obviously you have, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I have been out in my workplace since I had a Hobbit last year as non-binary, and I'd always been, before that, always been openly queer, at least in my current role and organization. It's interesting. I would say my colleagues, my co-workers, my friends, my managers, all wonderfully supportive. And on the large part organizationally, the company does, the department does really, really well. They do an incredible job of doing the best they can to ensure inclusive policy, inclusive approaches. The stumbling blocks for me have been somewhat bizarre in a sense. So for instance, because I work in communications, I work in digital communications. I spend a lot of time building web pages and stuff like that. And every time I go to push a web page up live on the internet, my dead name appears because the IT system is so out of date that it still uses my old name. The profile hasn't updated. I've just got sort of a veneer, if you will, an alias over it for my new name, which is a bit confronting. We're in a building that's 130, 140 years old. So there are no gender neutral bathrooms. And unfortunately, the government, like it's not, I don't say work for, a private company that can go, not necessarily saying that it would, but okay, we're going to put gender neutral bathrooms in because that's important. And, this is part of like the metric we score ourselves against. It has to come from the whole of the government. So I find myself tripped up sometimes by, should we say, public service considerations where maybe I can't push for a policy change like, say, bathrooms because it's deemed maybe sensitive.
Politically sensitive.
Yeah. So like these aren't, I want to be clear, these aren't world-ending sort of challenges to face in the workplace. I mean, they're challenges, they're real, and I face them every day. But I am very blessed that everybody in my workplace gets my name right, gets my pronouns right, and is wonderfully supportive. So that's been really positive for me. And I continue to push boisterously for change at an organizational and policy level.
Amazing. I guess, yeah. So like for me, I'll quickly add my 2 cents worth. Being, you know, it's such a strange position being a lawyer who's trans, because as I say, I personally know of about less than a dozen across the entire country. And all of them came out after they had practiced for a few years and were well suited and well into their careers. You know, I took a leap of faith by coming out just at the start of my grad program as an openly trans woman, as a trans lawyer, and just going, look, I can't hide in this closet anymore. You know, and I came bursting out of that at full speed and have effectively transitioned in the public eye. And it's safe to say, like, my expectations and my preconceived notions of what things would have been like for me have absolutely been blown out of the water. And I'm so thankful for that. It has shown me that, you know, the law isn't this crusty old industry that we like to think it is. Sure, it's got lots of traditions and things like that. And amazing. Exactly, Eli. It's got traditions, but that's what makes the law. But the people that are day to day on the ground aren't necessarily the ones that are enforcing those strict, rigid traditions. I'm also incredibly fortunate enough to work for a university, and universities are some of the most liberal places to work. And so, you know, that has assisted me greatly in my transition. I'm chair of the Pride Network at Griffith University, and I chair the committee and sit on the whole University Equity Committee. So like I have an amazing amount of power for someone that is only 25 and someone that has only been out for a year. It almost scares me how fast things have changed for me, but I'm also so incredibly grateful at the same time, because I want to prove to other lawyers out there that, yeah, like you can transition in the law and you can be that person. You can be respected in your own right. I like to say this for any of the lawyers in the room. The gays have Michael Kirby, but who do the trans people have? And so it's a bit hit and miss at this stage. And so I guess, yeah, like I think it's so important to be yourself and to just be out where you can. So I think I'll go to my next question. So to any of you who have come out whilst on the job, how did you find that process? I know some of you have already touched on it, but, you know, things like processes, policies, procedures, you know, what can you say that should have been done better? And how can we make it better? If that makes sense.
I've been messaged that my audio is really feedbacky. Is that the case?
It is a little bit.
Okay, so I can't fix that, but I'm going to keep talking.
Oh, good.
But this wasn't me coming out, but I did get to witness it at my last job. I was working in an online casino, which is a very interesting job. The like TLDR on it is that basically we worked out of office in Bondi and we set overseas, so it doesn't operate in Australia, because people always ask this. But what I got to witness was someone came out and as trans to HR, and what HR did was they sent out an email to the entire office saying that dead name will now go by new name. They said that they're going on medical leave to transition, so the company provided medical leave to transition, which is amazing. And then they also said, if you have any problems, take it up with HR. Do not message the person about it. And I was like blown away. I remember going into work at 6 a.m. That's when my shift starts, and opening my emails and seeing this, and I was like crying because I fully did not expect this. So just to see that they had those policies in place was really like reaffirming to me, because I say that I continued my career there and I did choose to start hormone therapy and change my name. I knew that they would support me, and furthermore, they wouldn't let me be exposed to any like bullshit that comes along with people questioning your identity. And the fact that they were willing to like take the form for me to discuss it with people was really cool. So I think that's like the strongest response and example I have for what places can do to support you. Like, it isn't my story, but even to witness that was amazing.
It doesn't necessarily even have to be your story. You know, that's a prime example of, you know, D&I done right in companies. And it's so important because I've seen so many failures of this on the internet, particularly in countries like the US, where, you know, you can still be fired for being gay or for being trans. You know, it does make me feel incredibly lucky to live in a country like Australia, where we do have such strong workplace protection laws in place that do protect us from retribution just simply for being who we are. I will just point out that I found out that for, you know, those of you who are lawyers in the room, and anyone else that has an interest in law, you might find this interesting. Obviously, Australia has, you know, Commonwealth Anti-Discrimination Law, the Anti-Discrimination Act in the States and things like that, and Human Rights Acts. Things like sexuality, gender, race, etc., are all protected attributes under each and every one of those pieces of legislation, including the Fair Work Act. However, and the Fair Work Act, for those that don't know, is like the governing piece of Australia's employment legislation. What I found out and realized was that gender identity, or, you know, anything like that, is not actually a protected attribute under the Fair Work Act. So you don't necessarily have any leg to stand on under a strict reading of the Fair Work Act if you were to get adverse action. So I saw that and I was pretty intrigued, because I go, that's something that's not really talked about that much. And it's such an important piece of legislation that defines Australian workplaces, and all of us are out in our workplaces. So not to scare anyone or anything, we do have rights still. Just anecdotal evidence of, you know, me spending too much time reading law stuff. Have any of you ever had to mask your true selves to fit in? I'm seeing a few nods. Go for it. Shoot. Whoever wants to go first. GC? Been a while.
Yeah, you know, it's been a while, but no, Bass touched on this earlier in the conversation about having to prescribe to, you know, I guess norms, what it means to be diverse. That really resonated with me, and I think that's true for me now. Like, obviously, I present in a certain way, and people interpret it where they want to interpret that. But the difficulty is what I found, particularly in the community, is I guess the gatekeeping that exists, what it means to be part of this community. And that is an ongoing conversation that all of us are having. Like, even the inclusion of non-binary in this space is a new inclusion. You know, like, it hasn't always been this way. It wasn't this way 2 years ago. And I think that's a really important point, because there is this pressure within the community and also out in the community to be acting in a certain way. And, you know, Ezra talked about this a bit, where it doesn't necessarily you don't need to fit in a certain conceptual box in order to be this way. And I think that's the main thing that makes me feel like I want to mask it. Even being here today is a bit nerve-wracking, because
I threw you on the spot.
No. But it is because, you know, because I know a lot of people. Like, I haven't gone through a process where I've necessarily come out to everybody. I've taken the same approach to my sexuality, where it was just like, I'll tell you if I want to tell you. And so that just means no one knows. And so, yeah. So I think that's a really interesting point where there is a sense of like what it means to be part of this community and how that permeates both within and outside of our community.
There's something, I'm just going to jump in if that's okay, Maddie.
No,
Something you were
go
saying
for
there,
it.
GC, that really, really resonated with me in terms of masking. Interesting enough, I'd say I don't mask in terms of my gender identity in the workplace or necessarily that much. My masking in the workplace is possibly more around neurodiversity, as I've noticed more and more recently. But the thing that really resonated with what Giancarlo was saying there was masking can be internalized as well, was the thought that came up for me. And I'm just going to share the news here because I can. I, on Thursday, found out that I was approved and got my script for going on hormones, which I'm super excited about. But there's been this interesting, thank you. Interesting, fun. I will. This interesting push and pull in my mind as someone who is non-binary of, do I want to go on hormones because this is what I want and this is an authentic expression of my journey and my identity, given realization, pardon the pun, in the flesh? Or am I doing this because I think this is what I'm supposed to do? And am I trying to fit into a box? And this has been one of the defining internal struggles for me of transitioning as someone who's non-binary, where, to be honest, a lot of like the goals that I have for myself in terms of presentation, in terms of transition, would appear on the surface to be binary. And I've had to, it's a meta level kind of deconstruction, if you will, of I've had to deconstruct the fact that these goals are mine, that is fine, this is how I want to appear, this is who I want to be, this is how I want to live my life. And that is authentic for me, and the construction of a binary framework, if you will, is put upon me from outside, and it's not me trying to fit in. And even though it looks like I'm fitting in, that doesn't mean that I'm fitting in and I'm still being me, if that all makes sense. But then there's also still that internalized struggle of something I remember saying to my psychiatrist in my first appointment to be assessed was, when we're talking about goals, as I said, if I'm being honest, there's this part of me that would be more okay with being misgendered as a woman than as a man. And if I had to pick on balance, which in modern society, and I'm sure anyone else on this panel and in the chat who's non-binary will agree with this, I'm still going to get misgendered most of the time by society. I'd much rather be misgendered as a woman than as a man. But that's a little bit of like the real politic of having to deal with being gender diverse in a paradigm that doesn't yet understand it. So yeah, there's a lot of masking that goes on there.
I wanted to touch on what you were saying and get you to expand a little further, and how this is a personal one for you. Obviously, you had that doubt and that unsettledness about going on hormones and whether that was right for you. How did you find that you overcame that and decided, actually, no, like, yeah, sure, I'm non-binary, but stuff it, I'm going to do this anyway?
I used my philosophy degree for the first time in 7 years and did a thought experiment.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. I thought you'd appreciate that. I sat there and I thought
about better than that law degree.
I sat there and I thought about, if I had to wake up in a given body tomorrow morning, and in terms of, and I'm obviously thinking purely in terms of the endocrine sort of paradigm at the moment, in terms of a body that's shaped by testosterone or a body that's shaped by estrogen, on balance, which body would I rather wake up in? And like that was a no-brainer. It was like, oh, estrogen 110%. I'll have some of that. Thank you very much. I literally stood in front of the mirror and I without being sort of shaming myself or without kind of trying to be critical or self-hating or anything like that, I kind of went down, sort of just looked at the mirror and I kind of went, what do I not want to wake up and see in the mirror tomorrow morning? I'm not going to go into the details of all of that, but like, actually, there's a few, like my face, for instance, like there were some things that were surprising. Like I was like, I can like change this. Like this is kind of not where I want to be. And as I went through that, I kind of went, okay, you know what? On balance, yeah, this is where I want to land on this one. I think the other struggle as well with, and I'm speaking in broad generalizations here, with transitioning medically in any sense, in terms of the treatment options that are available, is it isn't an exact science. Transitioning in many senses I've felt has been a compromise. What is the best deal I can make for myself, for my happiness, for my well-being, for my mental health in the long term? And ultimately, hormones was the best choice.
Fantastic. I love that. Okay, so I guess this is probably going to be a question for everyone here. And I'm particularly interested to hear how those of you who identify as non-binary feel about this and how you would handle it. And as you briefly touched on this just before, sorry, I've got a bunch of flyaway hairs at the moment getting in my mouth and everywhere. So pardon me if my hands are going everywhere. You can't really tell from this background, but yeah, they're going everywhere and it's getting annoying. So my question is, how do you handle being accidentally dead named or misgendered, particularly when you're non-binary? How do you deal with that? And what tips can you give for, say, a bystander who is a friend, a colleague, a family member who is sympathetic to who you are? How can they either step in? Is it worth stepping in? Is it something that you would handle yourself? I'm curious to hear how each of you would individually handle it. There doesn't have to be a right or wrong way. That's not what I'm looking for here. I just want to hear your individual thoughts, if you can. I'll give you a moment to think. I know it was out of left field. Sorry.
I know I just spoke, but I'm going to just throw one out there just to kind of kick things off. Policing others, and I don't know if that's the right word, correcting others' behavior is emotional labor. So in terms of being allies to your trans and gender diverse friends, pick up a bit of the load for us. And this is a conversation I've had with all of my coworkers. If you hear someone say, oh, like I've had people say, oh, I heard them saying, I don't know what to say. And I'm like, you lean over and you go, no, Ezra, they, them pronouns. And it doesn't have to be a dramatic thing. It doesn't have to be like a world-ending thing. It's like, you got my shoe size wrong. Big whoop, get it right next time. And move on. But pick up some of the emotional labor, I think, is the number one tip for allies, is it costs us a lot more to say something than it does you. So please speak up.
And how does that make you feel when you hear that, hear your dead name, or hear yourself being misgendered?
Good days and bad days, shall we say. Some days it's like, okay, yeah, cool, another day, another dollar. I don't get paid for it. I really feel like I should. But other days, it's you don't want to hear it. You can't hear it. You don't want to leave the house. You don't want to deal with it. Yeah, it varies. There are days I probably wouldn't ring home to my family, even though most of my family are pretty accepting, because I'm like, I know what name I'm going to get at the other end of the phone call, and I'm good with that today. Yeah, it varies.
See, I'm finding that at the moment as well. Yes, Danny.
So yeah, no, I 100% agree that it really depends on like the kind of day you're having and the kind of mindset you're in. Excuse me, if I'm having a good day, feeling like pretty good about myself and just life in general, I could be misgendered and I could just shrug it off. And I think there's a sense of not compassion, but like understanding that, okay, like most of the world has been brought up in this binary environment where you'll gender someone based on physical cues that you get about like what they look like and how they speak and stuff. And if someone does misgender you, sometimes when you're in a when you're not in a good mindset, it could feel like a personal attack. But like
absolutely,
really, yeah, but really it's like it's just they're seeing these physical cues and making a split-second judgment on the gender on what gender they think you are. And a lot of the time it's not any sort of attack. But then like when you are in kind of a bit down in the dumps and you do get misgendered, I find sometimes for me it's like I could be at home and like just feeling kind of the gender that I identify as, and just kind of going along my day, and then I could walk out and get misgendered at the cafe, and then it just feels kind of like a slap in the face, like it's it can be hard and it can kind of throw you off from that mindset that you're in. But yeah, so it is kind of a day by day thing, and yeah, you just have to take it as it comes, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Elise, did you want to add anything there, or you good?
I was gonna acknowledge, I guess, as like as someone who is a binary trans woman and fits into the traditional binary that society expects, things can be a little easier for me sometimes. I also am beneficial in the fact that I transitioned before moving to my current job. So the only people who really even know my dead name are the management. Most of my coworkers wouldn't have any clue what it is. So I've never been dead named at work. I've never been misgendered at work, which is just so nice to deal with it for so long before I came out of my previous job. And even after I came out too, I would get occasional people stuffing it up. But I sort of figured if someone knew who I was and was understanding and they were trying, but they were just getting used to it, then it didn't bother me too much. Obviously, the ones that bother you the most are the ones where you're out. For me, especially if I was out in public and a random stranger misgendered me. Thankfully, that hasn't happened in a very long time now. But yeah, no, I still. It is a slap in the face. It feels like you've been stripped naked almost, I would say, and your whole body, everything's on display, and everyone's thinking about everything now, and it's not cute. It's not a cute moment, that's for sure.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not. And, I think for me, it's even more painful, particularly when it comes from family. Like, I can give family a long, just a long birth and go, yeah, I get that you've known me as that for 24 out of 25 years, but also I particularly struggle with that. I go, but also, you should love me and accept me for who I am today. I'm finding it particularly hard right now because I'm up here at my dad's house on the Sunshine Coast for a week, and I'm meeting my sister for the first time as me since I transitioned. And so normally my dad and my stepmom get my name and my pronouns 100% correct. But for some reason with my sister being here, they're now second guessing that and accidentally slipping up from time to time. And so, like Elise, it's been, I don't remember the last time that I was dead named or misgendered, particularly in public. And to have it happen by those that you love most, I find quite difficult to deal with, particularly because of the emotional labor that it puts on you. And you end up feeling guilty for, being angry and hurt as a result of it. And if you say something, then your family gets angry and hurt that you said something. So it's that double trauma there going, oh, you just can't win either way. So no, I'm glad to hear that, things are going well for all of us. So we're getting life sorted. We're conquering the world one step at a time. I have a couple more questions before I'll throw the floor open to questions from the audience. So those of you who are in attendance today, if you can start thinking of your questions, drop them in the Q&A box. We've already got one. We'd love to hear from you all. Questions are free. They don't cost you anything, obviously. So please ask away. Anything you want to know about us personally, any question that, has been raised from tonight's conversations even, drop them in the box and let us know. And, we'll go accordingly.
Just want to add, if you're watching on Facebook, you can comment on Facebook. I'm monitoring that. So if you have any questions, just drop them in the Facebook comment box.
Sweet. So I guess, what have I got? What do you guys feel are the main concerns or misconceptions about being openly trans in the workplace? And, how have you helped colleagues come to terms with that? Or even just the wider public? I know that's a bit of a tricky one, but don't have to answer it if you can't.
I can go.
Yeah, go.
I don't know, especially when in my previous job, the one that I came out in, there were a lot of older white men in the business. Ones who probably haven't had much exposure to LGBT people in general, people who haven't, especially to trans people at all. So I had to go to, I didn't have to, but I felt like I had to go to a lot of effort to explain that, you know, trans people are like a normal thing, and they're not, you know, trans women aren't men with fetishes. They're not people who fantasize about living as a woman to get off or something. You know, it's like a very internal, it's a very real feeling about, you know, sort of being in the wrong body and needing to change your gender identity to match it. So that was a misconception I think I came up against, and I've come up against that with family and stuff like that as well. And yeah, it's taxing to continuously explain that it's not that. It is natural. It's normal. Believe it or not, I just want to be a woman. I don't get off about it. But yeah, no, that's the main misconception I would like to point out.
Cool. Rebecca, I'll get to your question soon. Cool. So, question for everyone. What are some best practices or actions that people in the workplace can do to support gender diversity or visibility, be that in the workplace or even at university, for, you know, Vas, since you're studying, you know, what sort of things do you wish, I guess what I'm trying to get at, what sort of things do you wish you'd seen when you were a student, when you were not out, to know that it was going to be a safe and a supportive workplace to come out in, and how can we help push that for future people to come?
Just refer to people using they, them pronouns, normalize asking for pronouns. I visibly look like someone who uses she, her pronouns just because of my body. I can't help that unless anyone wants to hand me $12,000 for top surgery. So, you know, so I feel like the thing that I really want to drive home is that don't assume anything. Like, if you know someone's pronouns, if they've been explicitly stated, please don't misgender them by using they, them. But like, if you don't know their pronouns, use they, them, make it normal, make it like a habit. Like cis people always use they, them pronouns when they're talking about when they want to like hide someone's gender to avoid giving something away. Like, you're used to using they, them pronouns, so you can absolutely extend that to consciously using it to refer to me.
I think that's a really interesting point that you raised there. You know,
Yeah.
society is trained to use they, them pronouns, but not necessarily in the way that we expect them to.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting point to raise, and it's one that I hadn't really considered until you mentioned it just then, and it's
So,
definitely
like,
thought-provoking.
the biggest like signal that I get from any space for it to be trans inclusive is there's not usually many indicators unless like a speaker is explicitly stating the pronouns at the start, unless panelists are introducing themselves with pronouns. That might not make the space safe, but it indicates that at least one person in the space is conscious of it. So even if your workplace isn't like trans inclusive or like explicitly trans inclusive, you can be like a safe space in the form of a person by expressing your pronouns or expressing that you accept trans people. Like, there are ways to say that. They're not coming to me right now, but yeah, I guess that's my spin on that.
I think it's an interesting point, because I mean, me personally here for a second, I struggle with that. I don't like it. I don't like having to state what my pronouns are, because I am a woman. You know, I dress like a woman, I talk like a woman, I look like a woman. And so it can be a bit of a struggle at times to go, now I'm almost forcing people to second guess and go, oh, but what actually are you, is a common one that I've actually experienced. And it's so hard, I guess, for non-binary people as well, because you're constantly outside of that box, full stop. And so unless you expressly state it, you know, it is something that it will otherwise go unspoken.
I do have a point to raise with that. You're implying that she, her pronouns can only be used by women. I know that might not be your intention, but that is what you're implying. So I just want to point out that like non-binary people use she, non-binary people use he, GC uses he and they,
Yeah.
and they're still validly non-binary. So
Oh, sure.
every woman, like every trans woman, IDs and she, her is kind of a sweeping.
No, I was more talking from my
Okay.
personal experience, you know, not speaking for everyone, just going me personally, it's a bit of an annoyance. But I do it for the common good. You know, whilst it hurts me personally to do it, I know that the recognition that it then gives someone else, I can justify that pain and that hurt that it then causes me, for instance. So no, I totally take your point on board, absolutely. And, you know, I've got a number of friends that use dual pronouns. And so it's definitely something that I am still trying to get my head around. I'll be perfectly frank and honest. It's not something that I was ever raised up around. And so it's only been within the last 12 months that I've encountered this sort of environment. And so it's still a learning curve for me to this day. And I think it's important to be honest about that and go, you know, we all come to this at different stages. Whilst my personal journey may be miles ahead of certain other people's, I still go, look, my social journey is still, you know, a year back. I'm still learning things. I still make mistakes.
I know that's something you and I have talked about a lot, Maddie, if you don't mind me sharing.
Yeah.
But we've known each other for a long time, and we've, like you sort of alluded to earlier, we've been on this journey more or less at the same kind of time in our own way. Different journeys, though. And this is the fascinating thing that I was thinking about while I was listening to you speak, Vas, and then to you then sort of responding, Maddie. There's a huge diversity and breadth of experience within the transgender diverse community. And that's good. Like, we should celebrate that. I think that's amazing. But it can be a challenge sometimes to find the sort of the I don't want to say the common denominators, because I don't think that's the right word. But the
commonalities almost.
Yeah,
the
shared points of connection, if you will. But the thing that kind of popped into my head, it's the first time I've really had this thought, so apologies if it's inelegantly articulated. The irony of this particular talking point, if you will, is that the reason that explicit pronoun stating benefits people such as myself and Vas so strongly, but then puts you in an uncomfortable position, by contrast, is the root cause is the same thing. Like, pronouns, my personal, I think I've cracked this joke to you once before, like, pronouns should be like shoe sizes. Everyone has one or more, potentially, because we all have a European shoe size and an American shoe size and an Australian shoe size, and that shoe size I can quite get into. We all have them. We should all be able to express them as part of who we are. Like, I need to get into a pair of 6-inch stilettos at some point. And our
Can
ability...
I please be there for that?
I'll webcam you, don't worry, I'll be fine. But at the end of the day, it's the problem is with the system, and this was going to be my original response to this question. The problem is with the system more than it ever is with individuals. We live in a society that, binary or otherwise, preconditions people to assume gender is inherent and innate and immutable, and strongly inherently connected to how you emerged into this world, shall we say. And until we pull that apart, we will find ourselves having these conversations. Because at the end of the day, the reason that that Vas and I need to, and Giancarlo need to be very clear in our pronouns so we don't get misgendered is the same reason that when you start talking about your pronouns, people go, huh, because the notion that we could be anything other than the pronouns as they correspond to the body we were born in is just so out there for most people. And
I think it's as you say, it's a systematic thing, and it's getting society to that point almost where we don't need to assume people's pronouns full stop. Just take people at face value is my biggest point. I don't care what your pronouns are, I care about you as a person. who you are as a person is the most important thing to me, and I want to hear from you and hear your experiences. Yes, GC. You're muted.
Sorry, I'm agreeing with everything that was said to this point, but I think the point you just made, Maddie, is a really, really clear one to me. I think it goes back to what Ezra said at the beginning of this conversation about the internal masking, that like the internal, the internal, I guess, I don't know what the word is, but the internal struggle that people feel. And it's about imagining that. It's not just about systemic, it's not just about the systemic, need for society to change the understanding what the binary is. It's more about it goes hand in hand with the individual journey. And that's a slow one. It can be a quick one in your case, Maddie. It probably isn't.
My physical journey, yeah, but my social journey, has been very different in that regard.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing. So I think the point about recognizing that don't assume anything is really about that aim. It's about imagining something beyond this.
I think work on the presumption that you will be told, and you will be told when it's suitable and applicable to be told. Until that point, there's no need. I don't know. That's just my personal point of view, and we're all going to have different views on the topic. And I know time is running away on us. So, last question for everybody is, and we'll end it on a happy note, I promise. What has been the best thing about being out and trans in the workplace? Yes, Ez?
I don't want to go first again. I keep talking. I was once able to crack a joke at two cis white straight male colleagues of mine. They cut me out of a conversation because they were doing that thing where they were both saying the same thing, but neither of them wanted to concede a point, so they were just going around in circles. And I sort of jumped in the conversation to kind of be like, do you mean this? And I got sort of shut out almost immediately, and I was able to go, oh, so now that I'm not a man anymore, my opinions don't count for anything in this conversation. And it was a humorous one, but I loved being able to throw it into conversation. And I love to bring that back up with them regularly. So that's maybe not the highlight, but it's one that comes to mind.
Love it. Beth?
For me, it's probably by being out, you kind of act like, I completely do not know this saying. What's it called? Whatever. I can't English. It's like being the honey that attracts bears to it.
Okay.
Honey pot. There we go. No, so when you're out in the workplace, or out anywhere, one of my favorite things is when people come up to you and they're like, "Hey, I am this as well." I think those moments are probably my favorite because it kind of makes your experiences worth it, because someone might feel motivated or emboldened to do the same for themselves because they know that someone else has done it. So I think that's probably my favorite thing about being out in uni or being out at work, which is pretty cool.
GC, Elise, Danny? Come on. Surely there's got to be something.
I don't know. I guess it's the recognition you get for living as your authentic self. I think for a lot of cis people, you just take that for granted, being able to be yourself in the workplace. And I just find it's really nice when people say, "Oh, it must be so good to feel like you're finally yourself now." And I'm like, that's such an important point because it feels amazing. And it feels so good to be able to be authentic and be yourself. I think that's just the best bit for me.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have been, completely accepted at my workplace, and I feel like I can, explore myself in a safe environment. But I think one of the amazing things is, I'm probably the first trans person that most of the people in my, office has ever met. I had a conversation with a close friend of mine who moved to Sydney from South Africa maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And she told me that, in South Africa, they had never heard of the acronym LGBT before, and yeah, so she said when she received the email that was sent out to notify people of that I was coming out as trans and changing my gender, she thought it was something that like was so foreign to her, but was so like amazing, and she was like just so interested and amazed at learning more about it, and she could really appreciate like the challenges that were involved in that. But yeah, I guess as well, I've been very fortunate with having people like that around me.
Awesome. That's amazing. I'm so glad that you've got people around you that are supportive, and that's the most important thing in a workplace, is to have supportive people, because work is your life. You're there more than you are at home for most people. And so to have a team that you can go to and feel safe in, day out for 5 days a week, if not more, for 8 hours a day, it's incredibly important. And I think that's what we all hope for ourselves, is that, even in our future careers, that we are just able to be who we are without question. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this is, be supportive and be visible in our case. So that wraps up the set panel questions for this evening. We have received 3 questions via the Q&A, and then 2 via the Q&A and 1 in the chat. So I'll go firstly with the one that's received the most comments. It's from Anonymous. Do you have any advice for those who are questioning their gender or that feel uncomfortable with their current gender identity but are not sure if it is due to anxiety, stress, or discomfort from other aspects of their life? That's something that I can relate with pretty hard there, and I'm sure quite a few others are by the looks of it. I'm seeing a few nods. So who wants to go first? Elise?
I think one of the best ways to start is go to a counsellor. Yeah. Look up a counsellor who state that they have experience with transgender people. That's what I did. I went to a local counsellor who stated that she was experienced with transgender and gay and lesbian, bisexual clients. And I went to her and I was able to talk through all my feelings. And I think the first time I went into that room, I was like, yeah, I want to do, I feel like I want to be a woman, but I'm just, it's all just in my head. It's all airy-fairy. It's not really real or anything. And yeah, and I was quickly able to discern what was real and what wasn't. And I found that's the most helpful place to start is you if you can, go to a professional and talk it through. That's the best way to start.
Amazing.
Yeah, in an absence of a professional, seek a support, seek a really supportive social network. Like Out for Australia is, not to plug Out for Australia, but kind of am plugging Out for Australia. Can be place for people. Can be that place for people. But if you can't, there's a lot of online spaces. VAS, for instance, moderates online, a huge online community, which I'm sure VAS will plug later on. But yeah, seek the support where it is. Obviously, go to professionals as well. But yeah, because I think that was having the space to talk it through, because you don't know what you don't know. You're in your home, right? And so that's really important to find that social network, wherever it may be.
And Vass has just plugged it down in the chat for those people that wanted to know. Cool. Did Ez or Danny want to contribute? Vass?
Yeah. Honestly, if you're young, make stupid decisions, like buzzing off if that's something that might reaffirm your gender identity. Dye your hair, try makeup, try like different clothes. And if you have the liberty to do that, like as a young person, do it. And just going out on a limb and assuming that you're a young person, because that's kind of how I messed around with my gender identity when I was like, I don't really know what I'm feeling. That's one way to go about it. The other way that I sorry, add-on. Maybe I reckon in that case, talk to a friend and experiment secretly, openly, whatever is most safe for you. But just kind of like so much of like people's identity is often tied to how they present themselves. So mess around with that presentation because it can be pretty fun. You might come out of it realizing that you're somewhere on the trans spectrum, or you might come out of it realizing you're cis. And that's just an experience you have. I know of people who experimented with their gender identity and concluded that they were cis, and they're equally as valid as the rest of us.
Oh, and I think that's such an important thing to note, is there are so many misconceptions within the wider society that to detransition or to not go through with it, or whatever you want to call it, is a sign of weakness. It's a sign of shame. But no, like it's just your life. You know, you're trans if you're trans, you're non-binary if you're non-binary, if you're not, you're not. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And there should be no judgment passed to anyone as a result of that. And I think that's something that's very important. I think in the absence of time, I'll move on to Rebecca's question quickly. I'd love to know if anyone's experiences with feelings of pressure coming from being visible / an advocate. Do you feel that pressure to give that visibility to the community? And if so, how do you mitigate that? Or how could we help you mitigate that as allies? Rebecca, that is an amazing question. I will throw it over to the team and we can come up with.
So I had a recent experience where someone within the Jewish community that I grew up in, who's much younger than me, reached out to they told me that at the moment they identify as non-binary, but they're questioning and think that they want to transition to female, to a transgender woman. And they asked me to meet them for a coffee. And I met up with them, and I just felt so out of my depth. I just felt that who am I to, tell them how to, go about their journey. But I also felt, imposter syndrome. I didn't feel like I was qualified to give them advice, even though, I'll be on hormones for almost 2 years in May. So I think having that experience was very eye-opening for me in that it showed me how much I did doubt my knowledge and kind of that I gained from my experience. And I think the fear of maybe saying the wrong thing or not being able to help the way that you want to. But I think from that experience, just being there to listen and just give the best advice you can, because the whole, and as I'm sure you can attest to, everyone can, that this journey is we don't really know what we're doing, but we're trying our best, just kind of, and that's kind of all we can do. And so by helping out people who do reach out, is a good way to I think I help alleviate that pressure if you do get the opportunity.
I think that's a really good point. And I think it's something that for someone like Rebecca is incredibly cognizant, as someone who is, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, Rebecca, but the gender and sexuality officer at the QUT Law Society. So, you may have people come up to you and ask, what can I do? Is this going to be a safe space and things like that? And what can I do? And I think my perspective is, for an outsider, as an ally, the best thing you can do is be there to lend an ear, to sit down with that person and let them talk. Just let them tell you everything that they have on in their lives, why they're feeling this way. You don't have to be their counselor. That is not your job. Your job, though, is to be a friend and to lend an ear. And I think that's something simple that we can all do. And then obviously say to that person further down the track, look, I think it's important that you go seek professional help on this because I'm no expert in this at all. And you'll be better served that way. And then point them in the direction of resources for that and that sort of thing. Sweet. Last question I'll move on to. I hope that helps, Rebecca. Is from Heidi. How do I support my cis boyfriend to express his feminine/androgynous side when I myself, a 19-year-old trans female, begins to question their identity and doubt I could be with them if they came out due to past experiences dating a trans woman?
I'm gonna break that up into like two parts.
Yeah.
Like, how do you support, and then your doubts. So I'll address the doubts first. I don't think anyone on this panel is equipped to tell you how to work through your previous relationships. I feel like that is probably best solved or talking with your current partner. But how do you support someone who's exploring identity? Honestly, if you are trans, feel like treat him. Sorry, I'm gonna use them for your partner because I don't know the pronouns. Treat them like how you wish you were treated when you were coming out. Like reaffirm them, ask them what they need. Because if you're in a relationship with them, you basically have like free game on like asking them what they need. But yeah, like I think you can only understand what they need by talking to them. So I hope you work through that.
So just a question for clarification, Heidi. Has your partner expressed a desire to be more feminine or androgynous? And, you know, if so, like what steps have you currently done to support them through that? Is that something that you would be willing to accept them on? Or is it more that, you know, you don't know what to do entirely? If you're comfortable, just drop that in the chat and we can try and help best as we can. Ez, did you have anything to comment there? Like, knowing your background and story, I don't know whether this is something that you'd be willing to speak on.
Certainly, it definitely resonates with me in terms of my background and like my personal history. I think Vas broke it up beautifully there. There's two parts, and again, I'll address the doubting first. I'll say all I will say is this again: when none of us are therapists. Obviously, we all, when we enter into any relationship, we're in any space, we all bring our own personal histories. That's completely valid. Your feelings are your own. And it's understandable that you have a personal history that's shaped your experiences and your outlook on the world. As I think you've done there, you've recognized that you've brought your own personal experience and your own personal journey into this space, and that's completely valid. If it's something that you're worried about impacting your present relationship, my only piece of advice would be to go and talk it out with someone qualified to talk it out. And that would be a qualified professional if you feel comfortable doing so. In terms of support, I honestly, I just have to mirror what Vas said. It's a question of giving them the space to express their needs and express their desires, being a supportive ear as best you can. Setting clear boundaries for yourself is really, really important. We, as humans, cannot take on other people's journeys for ourselves, but we can set clear boundaries and parameters for how we do support others. So I think if I was to boil it down, seek professional help if that's something that you feel is appropriate and necessary for you, for your personal journey. And even to talk through your partner's journey as well. I know when I speak to my partner about my journey, like one of the first things we put on the table was always feel free to go and talk to someone else about this, particularly a professional, because I'm going to be going through some changes and that will impact you too. I'm in your space quite a lot, no matter how big or small the journey is. So there's that. Communication, point number 2, talk it out, be honest, be open, be vulnerable, and compassion. I'm going to make an assumption that you and your partner care for each other want the best for each other, and would like to continue seeing each other's faces on a at least semi-regular basis. And as such, I think that's all you can really start with.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ez.
Thank
So,
you.
Thanks for
I'm
that.
going to stop being camp counselor now and mute my microphone.
Okay, brilliant. So last call. It is now 6:30. Any urgent, pressing, last-minute questions that we need to address? If not, thank you all so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you like, follow, and come along to future OFA events. Obviously, this year is going to be a bit different to what we normally do. So you'll probably be seeing a lot more of our faces on little black screens. So hope you enjoy, and I hope that you've enjoyed this discussion tonight and that you've learned something from it. So once I close this, you'll be sent over to our Google Forms just to do a survey. So if you can please fill out that survey as honestly as you can for us. It helps us improve for next time. We'd greatly appreciate it. And we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Wait, I'm going to do something before we all leave.
Oh, quickly, Baz.
Try it. Non-binary flag. Okay, thank you, everyone.
And on that note, au revoir. Thanks, everyone.